And welcome back to my channel. Unless you're new here, and then just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I highlight and spotlight and jabber on about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And I'm going to try to get back into this thing after my near-fatal experience with a nasty flu virus that wanted to kill me for some strange reason. I'm a nice guy. I don't really understand why it wanted to kill me like that, but it did, and it tried. So, tonight we are going to talk about Honeydew. The Flesh is Family. Now, Honeydew was released in 2020, and it stars Barbara Kingsley, Sawyer Spielberg. Yes, that's Spielberg. He is the son of Steven Spielberg and Kate Capshaw. Malin Barr, Stephen Ambrose, and William Adelot. And yeah, it was directed and written by Devereux Milburn. And we are going to talk about it sometime, I don't know, just about right now. Now, don't let the sweet, no pun intended, title fool you. This movie is extremely disturbing. It is a little indie horror movie that I like to call a quiet, psychotronic Texas Chainsaw. Is the way I like to look at it. So, Honeydew starts out with a funeral. There's this funeral going on. Some young girl is singing. They seem to be burying a woman's husband. Well, they are burying a woman's husband. And a rabbit hunter shows up like over the hill, and she like looks at him really strangely, and he gets out and he's walking around down there, and it's very creepy from the very beginning. This movie leaves me, it didn't take long for this movie to give me this really strange, unsettled feeling. You know, the atmosphere, I don't know, I would say within 10 to 15 minutes of this movie starting, I felt really unsettled. It had a really interesting atmosphere about it. So, this guy is out hunting rabbits and he hears something. He's a large guy. And he looks over there and sees a barn, and he goes over there and he seems to find something in the barn that freaks him out, and he starts running, and next thing you know, we're introduced to our lead characters, and that is Sawyer Spielberg and Malin Barr, or whatever her name was. Malin Barr, yeah. And that is Sam and Riley are their names. And I probably had that wrote right here in my notes if I'd have just looked. Sam and Riley. Yet I did that instead of doing that. I'm going to be a little confused for a while. So we get introduced to them. They're riding down the road. She is a botanist, and she's listening to this documentary type stuff about Sortico, which is a wheat fungal virus that killed and maimed a lot of people in the Middle Ages. It's some kind of fungus that grows on wheat. If you don't get it off and then you use the wheat, such as for bread, it will cause gangrene in your extremities, drive you insane in the end, and kill you, and nasty stuff like that. So that's the reason that they're out here, is because this local area had an outbreak that caused a bunch of the livestock had to be put down. So she's out there to do her thesis on it, and they have these intentions of sleeping, camping out so that she can do some research on this wheat. Meanwhile, he is a struggling actor, so he's like always doing his lines and stuff like that. Well, something happens. The GPS goes out. They sort of get lost. They don't know where they're at. They know they're close, but they don't know where they're at. They think they're at the right field, and they set up camp in this field, this wheat field. They are woken up that night by Euless, who informs them that they are on his property and that they need to leave. So they pack up and they start to leave, only to realize, boom, somebody left the hazards on, of course, and so the battery is dead. They start walking, figuring that they can get somewhere, and they end up seeing a light, and we show up at, of course, an infamous farmhouse. When they knock on the door, this really strange woman, Karen, she answers the door, and she is very, very creepy. She's very, very nice, but she is very, very creepy. He takes to her a lot more than the girl does. The girl is like, Riley is just like, I'm very uncomfortable here for some reason. But he is, she's obviously fascinated with him for some reason. This is an old lady. So she offers them, we want to use the phone to call AAA. Oh, well, they'll take too long. I'll just get my friend to come help you jump off. Meanwhile, she fixes them a little something to eat. The friend never comes. She ends up telling them they can stay in the basement, which I would have done that. I don't care how nice she is. I would have never done that because I'm just not that. I'm just a paranoid motherfucker. So I'm not going to do that. I would have went back to the car. I'm like, that dude's coming back. Well, okay, wait a second. Considering what happens later, I don't guess that would have been any help to me. I thought I had a way out. But I didn't, now that I think about it. So anyway, there is this movie has some very interesting cinematography. They do a lot of split screen, like he's doing this and she's doing that, different, who's doing what, and it's like split screens, one on top of the other or side by side. You would think it would bother you. I've just never seen that much of it before in a movie, and it really worked well, though. I mean, they didn't do it in a way that caused me to be freaky about it. I actually liked it. I enjoyed the cinematography. It was something new that I haven't seen a lot of. So you have all of this really weird stuff, and then they end up meeting that heavyset guy, the one that you saw at the beginning of the movie that was hunting for rabbits. And he's there, and he's got like bandages on his face, and he's acting really weird. And she ends up telling them that he got kicked in the head by a cow, that was her son named Goonie. And they just accept it because why wouldn't you, right? So all of this weird stuff, you'll have to watch the movie. All of this really weird imagery, this weird relationship between Riley and Sam, he's kind of, she's a very controlling person, and there's no way in hell no one's going to control what I eat like she does to him. So that was like a point of contention in the movie. So they have an alright relationship, but it's not the best, so they don't delve too much into it, but then again, you can tell it. He sneaks upstairs. Well, he doesn't sneak. He just goes upstairs because he's basically been starved for months. Don't eat this, don't eat that because your cholesterol's high. So he goes in and eats all this shit that's in the refrigerator. And that's when the really weird stuff starts happening. He hears that old lady crying upstairs in a that's a crazy person kind of way. And this is all occurring in just this 24-hour period. So when all of this weird stuff happens, he ends up passing out at the table, and he has this absolutely amazing psychotronic dream that is just a privilege to watch because it's so fucked up. It really looked like Pearl, the Ty West movie Pearl. That psychotronic dream really, it was like it was filmed in CinemaScope or something. It was like a really interesting scene in a movie. So he ends up finding that guy when he wakes up. He ends up finding that guy in the car, his car. And he starts like, what are you doing out here, Goonie? What's going on? And how come there's no reception? And he ends up getting frightened because of the way this guy's acting. Because this guy's acting like he's scared and he wants to get out of here. He does end up trying to call the police. But of course there's no reception. So what are you going to do? He ends up hearing something down at the barn, just like that guy had done right at the beginning of the movie. He goes down there and he walks up to the box, and there's this big box sitting there, you know, like a big chest. And he walks up to it, and I tell you, you don't even really see that old lady, but she scares the shit out of you. Because she's just sitting over there, and when they do show you that she is sitting there just pleasantly watching him, she's got some big hypodermic thing in her hand. And right about the time that you're like, there's that woman, what is she doing there, and what is that? She jumps, I mean like a rattlesnake, you know, like super quick. She reaches over there and she like jabs him in the ass with that thing. And that's when things get like really, really creepy. He wakes up. When he wakes up, him and Riley, God, it was so weird. It's like if you can picture like a telephone pole, and halfway up the telephone pole, there are two chairs with ladders leading up to the chairs. They are up there tied to chairs. Not only are they tied to chairs, but they got that shit that like dentists use, you know, that gas. They like have masks on, and there's this like helium gas or whatever it is down there at the bottom. And you're like, what in the fuck is going on? And below them, there's this big giant picnic table, and Goonie's sitting there in a wheelchair because his legs are gone. And that chest box is in the middle of the table. And that Euless guy is there, shows up, and you got the old lady. And they're like cooking, like grilling out kind of shit, with them tied up there on the pole like that. And the woman actually starts in her weird way explaining, you know. She says a bunch of religious jargon, of course, you know, about, you know, that plague of that wheat fungus and stuff, and how it had ruined their lives and caused her husband to die, and all kind of crap like that. Because that woman, I think, well, they're all crazy because she's just continued to cook and eat that poisonous wheat. And she's telling them that, you know, Goonie had been doing pretty well, but he was shooting blanks, and it really wasn't doing them any good. And I was like, he's what? Shooting blanks? Are you talking about like well, first of all, you're too old to get pregnant, so what are y'all doing? You're like, okay, this is getting like really strange. I didn't understand what it was. And so she's like, and so now I've got a new one, you know, we got you to try, and we're going to test it. And then her and Euless like pull the box to the middle of the table, and you're like, you know, I know there's nothing good in that box, you know. And she's like, well, we're going to they open up the box, and it's their daughter, the one that you had seen at the beginning of the movie, this girl reading the Bible into a cassette tape. And that's what that old lady's been listening to throughout this whole movie. So she's in the box, and she's obviously completely and totally mental, right? She is like in a fugue state of complete retardation, or, you know, brain damage or whatever. And she, of course, has no legs as well. They're like cut off at the knees. So she ends up like basically telling him, you know, once we were through with Goonie's bottom, meaning I guess they've been trying to use this poor man, because that's not her son. It's a guy that they kidnapped, just like they've done them now. He shows up on the land when he was doing that rabbit hunting while she was at the funeral. They ended up kidnapping him. So you're like, oh my God, this is a hell of a lot sicker than I thought it was. And they basically tell him, we're going to let her test you out now, because when she cut a piece of his ass off, basically, and that's what they're grilling. And so he's hearing all of this, knowing that they are feeding her this chunk of ass that she had taken out of him, and they feed it to that daughter and sort of let him know that they've been trying to get her pregnant to continue life and all of that. And then she ends up saying, and we're not quite through yet, there's one more step. And that is that Euless guy was a vet, and he did all of their, so I guess he's sort of like become that old lady's companion since her husband died. He did all of our veterinary needs on our animals, and he knows how to, calm things down. So this is when we find out, and they find out, that this dude is going to perform an orbital lobotomy. That's why that Goonie guy's been acting the way he has, is that, that they stick that needle in your eye and bang it with the hammer and break your prefrontal cortex thing. And so they're going to do that to them. And you're like, this is definitely not what I thought this movie was going to be about, man. And Euless does get up there, and he's just about to do the procedure when you see berries and cherries in the front yard, right? Because that phone call he had made earlier, the cops did finally get it, and it just took them a while to get out there. But of course, that old lady, she ran around to the front, and she's going to talk them into leaving, that everything's okay. And she took a big, she's got one of those things they kill cows with, it's like, it's a big tube, and obviously it's got a shell in it, and you put it up against to kill an animal, you put it up against its head, and, and it's just, the whole fucking thing is disgusting. So either they're going to talk the cops into leaving, or she's going to kill them, as she's just made that perfectly clear. So while she's out front doing that, though, here's their chance, because Goonie's right there, and despite the fact that he's had a prefrontal lobotomy, orbital lobotomy, he's still, however, Francis Farmer had a lobotomy. Of course, that was done in a hospital. So, you're still there. There's only a little bit of you left. They did manage to get him to get up there, come up the ladder, and free them and take the mask off so they could breathe. And of course, they're still terribly fucked up, right, on that helium and all. But they do manage to get down. She manages to get rid of the cops. She comes around, they're loose, and shit, the shit hits the fan. Goonie grabs the girl, Riley, and tries to get away. The guy, Sam, he's trying to get away, but he ends up, getting shot in the leg. She shoots him in the leg. So he's fucked up there, laying on the ground, halfway unconscious. They go after Goonie. She goes after Goonie. And that dumbass, well, I hate to be offensive, to the poor guy, because he had a lobotomy, so you can't expect him to make the best decisions. He ends up running through one of the many, many rabbit traps and bear traps that she's got set up around the property. And that fucks him up. And there's Riley trying to crawl away. And she walks up to Goonie and it's like, oh, my poor baby, I'm so sorry, you're not of any use now, And she takes that animal euthanizer thing out and she, kills him with it. And you're like, yeah, this is some crazy fucking shit. And I can tell right now, at this moment, this is not going to be a happy ending movie. And it's not. So, next thing you know, flash forward, right? I guess it's 6 months later or something, and Riley is sitting there at the table in the same place that Goonie used to sit, watching fucking cartoons. Obviously, she's been lobotomized, and parts of her face have been cut off because, that's what the woman feeds her daughter and stuff. Flesh is family. So, and the guy, they've cut his legs off at the knees, and he is chained to the bed down there, and he has also been given a lobotomy, because he is also acting just like Goonie, where that woman goes down there and feeds him, and her daughter is now not being kept in the chest, and instead she's being kept at one end of the bed facing him, and he's at the other end of the bed facing her, and neither one of them have any legs, from the above the knee down. So I guess that's where she's keeping them now. She goes down there and feeds them, and then she reaches over and she takes off his clothes once he's fed, and she takes her daughter and pulls the daughter over and sets her on top of him. And I'm just like, this is some shit right here. Because that is just, this old lady is crazy. I'm serious. The wheat did a whole hell of a number on her brain, what I'm saying. So that's basically what's happened, is that the daughter and her husband were made terribly sick by this sortico, this fungus that grows on wheat. And it wasn't just the cows that it killed. It did exactly what it did in the medieval times. It caused her daughter to have her legs cut off, and her arm, parts of her arm. So it reminded me of that whole Courtney Love song, Jennifer's Body. Hole and Courtney Love, they wrote a song for the movie Jennifer's Body because she was friends with that guy that made Jennifer's Body. And so it's on, what is it, the first album, Live Through This, or their second album, Live Through This, they have a song called Jennifer's Body. And in that, it's he keeps her in a box by the bed, alive, but just barely. That's what this woman has done. She's had to amputate her daughter's arms, and her legs below the knee or at the knee. So that means she had to literally pick her up and set her on top of him and do that. And I'm just like, this is disturbing. It's obviously Steven Spielberg's son is, he doesn't mind picking the weird ones to do. So yeah, that's the way the movie ends, is with her basically, what would you call that? She's raping him, lobotomized. So she's raping him with her daughter, and she's also raping her daughter with it's all that. I mean, I'm not even sure what crimes they would list it as, right? Because you would really have to. I'm sure it would be a very long list of crimes, though. So, yeah, that was Honeydew from 2020. It is extremely disturbing film. It starts out very interesting atmosphere, very interesting cinematography. I really enjoyed it. It is something new. It's a pretty unique storyline. There are elements, of course, the cannibalism, a Texas Chainsaw, the farmhouse, a crazy patriarch or matriarch that has come up with this weird lifestyle. But it's very gross. It's very disturbing. But at the same time, it's very mesmerizing. I just watched it 2 hours ago to have it fresh in my mind, which is why I really didn't even look at 3 pages of notes. I didn't have to. Actually, I watched all 3 of them that I had planned to do a month ago when I ended up in hospital with this flu. So I watched them all 3 again a while ago to finally try to get back into things. But, so yeah, that was Honeydew. From 2020. It's absolutely amazing. If you like weird, independent um, horror movies, this is definitely one of them. I was very glad to have found it, heard about it, and did manage to get my hand on a physical copy. So yeah, that is Honeydew from 2020, Sawyer Spielberg, and I will see you in the next thing that I do. Love you, miss you, bye. Always remember and never forget, you are a very special person, no matter what anybody says to you. If they say anything different, they are lying. Really, have you seen Honeydew? Tell me what you think about it. And if you haven't, you really should try to find it somewhere. It is definitely worth a look. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Honeydew.